We all have apps, and there's a growing market and a growing interesting market in terms of apps that are available for young people and education. So one of my favorites at the moment is called Beat the Book. Now, any good app really is something that's quite simple and addresses and tries to solve a simple problem. So it took as its basis the problem that, as you know, if you're a young person and you're not terribly skilled at reading, that's a very painful and difficult situation in the classroom. One, it's something that you find very challenging and it's very embarrassing, asking for help, talking to the teacher. You know, raising your hand is an ordeal for many young people. Even staying behind, when other people know that you're staying behind in class, is really very difficult. Then if you're reading, for young people, it's something that they find really, you know, the sorts of question answer to check your understanding of reading is something that's really quite tedious. This app is based on an idea of gamifying. So teachers, when they set a book, can then come up with a set of questions that we always used to do as teachers. I'm an ex-English teacher by trade. But what it does is that it gamifies it. So as the young person goes through and gets questions right, they gain points, it changes their profile, etc. It also has the facility, then it transmits the answers to the teachers so they can, in a very simple way, know what the answers are and how the student's doing. And it also allows some questions and comments from the young person so they could quietly say, they're really struggling with of mice and men, and could they find out, and this didn't make sense. So a really interesting app. It's available on the Android store. It's free of charge. Another one is Promise Keeper. Now, of course, none of you in this room, but there are quite often times when we might make promises to young people or have a promise made to us by a young person, and then in the busyness of life, it gets lost. We forget. We know we want to do something, and actually the worst kind, isn't it, was when a child has promised something to us, we've promised some sort of reward or benefit, and then we just get caught up in the busyness of a school day, and that gets lost, and that's really can erode the sort of the confidence and trust with young people. This is an app that allows a young person and an adult, or two young people, to negotiate a promise that is made, when that promise must be kept by, what the consequences and rewards are, and then sends reminders to both parties to allow, and then allows them then to accept and agree that the promise has been made. Again, available free of charge. Remember Me takes an interesting idea. Both parts. One, that we are all looking for ways of reminding ourselves, and young people in particular, trying to find ways to remind themselves of the deadlines, appointments, things that have to do for important courses. Now, quite often young people find the normal adult office-based apps to be a bit boring. They work in a much more visual environment, much more auditory. So this is an app that uses music, sound, pictures to remind people of those important deadlines. Now, you might be wondering at this point, I didn't know she ran an app company. Really, what's so great about these apps? If I say to you that the inventors of these apps are all under the age of 16. These are just 3 of the winners of the Apps for Good competition that was run last year. Now, I've chosen these 3. One, because I think the apps deal with issues that we as teachers are often trying to fix for students, and they're finding solutions to fix it themselves. 2, that you would say, not knowing just by looking at these students, all 3 of these teams are working within schools that are considered to be working in challenging circumstances, very high EAL, free school meals, etc. And lo and behold, we're talking about technology, and there are girls in the picture. And if I say that within our course on Apps for Good, we're at about 41% girls. And I was delighted that even when it came up to the competition and the winners, that we had an even spread between girls and boys. And although we offer to our schools the whole range of schools, I was delighted to see a great representation from those schools that are working in challenging circumstances. So really, this is at the heart of Apps for Good. This is about letting young people choose their problems, find their solutions using the technology, and it's very much about what we are at Apps for Good. We try and flip the typical dynamic within the classroom and within education that is very much about what's done to students. It is based on problem solving. It's very easy to think that Apps for Good is just about coding and computing, but actually what drives through it and would drive through any good solution within IT is effective problem solving. So it is very much about the young people choosing that. And it's why I use the phrase, we're starting to use this more often. Rather than talk about pupil-centric learning, which is good, I'm not suggesting that's not a good thing. And I think much of education has already begun developing in that area. I think what's more interesting is what we would call student-driven learning. that actually the impetus, the choice, the selection of what to do, how to do it, finding the answers comes from the student themselves. It's very much at the heart of what we do. We work very hard with our teachers to get us better at closing our mouths and putting our hands behind our back when we're working with our young people. And it's very difficult because young people are also trained to let us fix it for them. So we often say that, you know, to our teachers, you're doing it right if the students are saying to you from time to time, but miss, it's hard. But miss, what are we supposed to do? And the real key to effective teaching on the Apps for Good course is not to provide that answer for them, but to let them find out themselves. And we think then what motivates them through that really challenging thing, because those first two parts of that equation are actually really hard and very much what our young people aren't trained to do. We have, for many of our young people, them very well trained to sit quietly, wait to be told if it's right or wrong, and if it's wrong, to sit quietly long enough that we give them the answer. When you change that dynamic, it's very uncomfortable for young people. And what we find then, what softens that blow is the fact that they are working with technology that they're very confident with, that they're very happy with. So we take those very things that quite often the unions say we should be banning from schools and confiscating from students, and we're saying take it out, put it on the desk, and use it. And in doing so, we're helping young people to realize that this isn't just a consumer toy, it's actually a creative tool. That actually not just a creative tool to create more technology, but it's also a powerful learning tool. And those three things together put together what we would call Apps for Good. We're starting to use, we're all very familiar with STEM as an important part of education. It's something that we as education know is important, and we would say within the economy is important. Now, we've already jumped ahead. Like Ian Livingston talking today, we would say just to call it STEM is to make it dry and boring and is not actually what universities and what the industry is calling for. We do need the arts in there. But at Apps for Good, we're greedy. We want to look ahead. It's not just enough to be STEAM. We would say STEAMed, because what we'd add to that, not just art, but design. Anyone within business, within industry, within engineering would know that it's actually, that we live in a society that the more you understand the principles of good design, the more effective what you're trying to do is possible. And then we would add to that entrepreneurialism. We know that going out into the world today, the best professionals in the technology industry, in engineering, in mathematics, in science, also have a sense of how that fits within the real world, how to take that to market, how to get that idea sold and to do something with it rather than waiting to be discovered. And so when we also talk about entrepreneurialism, good entrepreneurialism is about problem solving, it's about thinking skills, it's about working with teams, it's about communication. So really, Apps for Good is much more than that coding. When those young people come up with their problem, when we ask them to go back and do their market research, they have to do their business planning, they have to think about their marketing, they have to look at designing the solution using tools like App Inventor and beginning to code with things like CSS and JavaScript, but it's also about, can they do that sales pitch? Can they think about how they might market that in today's busy social media market? And as to putting that all together, we have a course that becomes a STEAMed course. So now, in saying that, there are lots of courses out there. There are lots of coding courses out there. Why does this? And I think this is something that begins to link into our work with Iris Connect. Apps for Good is not the expert, the guru sitting in the middle, handing out these pearls of wisdom just to our schools. We see ourselves at the center of a hub, bringing together some key audiences and then sharing that information across. And that's really where it comes to life. We pull together the course materials and put that out, but a key component of that is our teachers. I have experts who know a great deal about technology. I'm the only person who's been in a classroom. What I rely on is the fact that I have 200 dead keen teachers who every time I turn around, typically for teachers are very apologetic. I hope you don't mind. I sort of did something different with that, at which point I always say, yes, share, yes, share. We have teachers that are going out and saying, well, I know it wasn't there yet, so I sort of mapped this against the national curriculum. I have a grid that probably doesn't make sense. And I say, share it, bring it through, and look at what we're doing. The teachers are really the lifeblood of what we do, and because they're what makes it work in the classroom and brings it to life. Added to that, I've got my expert community. People ask how we do this, how much do we charge? What I would say is I've got such enthusiasm for what we're doing. On the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see I have corporates, in the first instance, who are helping us through donations, through sponsorship, to be able to offer our course free to schools and to run our competition, to take the kids out to market. But I think the really exciting bit is that top bit at the corner, which is my expert community. I have 200 plus people who in the middle of their day job are raising their hand, are chasing us in order to be able to call in, to Skype, to use Google Haunts, to talk to our students. And I'll talk about that more in a moment. But that expertise coming through is very powerful for teachers, because any teacher, when they start this course, feels very daunted. Technology is a fast-moving field. The challenge of trying to stay current in these things, and particularly to ask any teacher to be a esteemed expert and to know about all of these things, is very, very difficult. Knowing that they can call on the expertise one-on-one to support teams is really, really powerful. And then we've got our students and alumni. What I'm delighted as we're moving forward is that we have our students who have won the competition who are saying more and more they'd like to serve as experts. They'd like to. A lot of our most effective schools are having those winning teams come back and talk to the next year's cohort about tips of the trade. How do you win the competition? So they're bringing their expert into the mix. And bringing that together, it is really important not just to have that community operating within the school classroom environment, but also to look at how we can take it outside the classroom. Our teachers have to get used to this. I have to say, and when people say, you know, how can we become a part, my first comment to schools is this is difficult. This isn't for every school. This isn't for every teacher. Because what we are trying to do is to move very much away from, I think, hugely from that fountain of knowledge. I think most teachers are more and more comfortable and beginning to accept that that sage from the stage mentality isn't going to work anymore. But we take it a step further. Rather than just the facilitator, we would start talking about our teachers as that coach helping the rock climbing. Because what this means is that we're letting young people climb the mountain themselves. All right, they're finding the challenge. They're up there having to find where the best handholds are. How do they move? How do they shift? They see it much more closely than we do. It's not that they're left on their own. There are safety nets. There are ropes. But it's not just the teacher down at the bottom. The teacher's down there shouting help and support and adding that pedagogical sense to what we do. But then that teacher is able to rely on the experts to then talk about that current top knowledge about what's really happening today, whether it be on technological, what's happening in coding and feasibility, apps that are coming to market, how to do the best market research, how can you create the most effective business plan, etc. And that dynamic, we think, is really, really powerful, and one in which our teachers approach with some trepidation. But the more they do that and more they start understanding that, the more excited they become and more they're becoming some of our greatest advocates going out there and doing that sort of recruitment on our behalf. Connecting with experts, and I think, you know, this is at the heart of something that will be important, I think, for MirandaNet members and to teachers. We all know how challenging teaching is at the moment, full stop. It is a full-time, 365-day job. Trying to stay current in pedagogy and government requirements in and of itself is a great deal to do. What we've found is we are being able to achieve something that I think schools have been trying to do for some time, which is creating that dialogue with experts. We've all had visitors come and do that lovely career talk. We've all tried to set up those opportunities which are about mentoring and have two maybe really great sessions and then fall apart. And we've all had those moments where the clash between two very different work environments comes to the fore. The way in which business works, the hours they keep, how they communicate, and how schools operate and communicate can be a real difficulty. I mean, you know, as an American talking about learning to speak with British, I sometimes feel that I'm dealing with the same thing of separated by a common knowledge. We've often found that we have a lot of companies and experts who do desperately want to work with schools. Schools do desperately want to get that expertise for their kids, but it can be quite challenging. What I would share with you in terms of learning is the sorts of things where we're having greater and greater success is promising less, delivering more. I think one of the benefits of Apps for Good is there's a really focused agenda about what the expert needs to do. We're not putting them in front of a class of kids and saying, just talk about anything, it will be fine. We're not asking them to deliver lessons and have pedagogical expertise to do that. We're not asking them to deliver part of the curriculum. What we're asking them to come in and do is to share their own specific area of expertise.
I'm not going to offer a surprise.